This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. And welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X-Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern. And with some affiliates, from 10 a.m. until 6 a.m. I'm sorry, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. A full 8 hours of the X-Zone. Now, if you'd like to listen to us 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, visit www.xzbn.net/live.htm. That's xzbn.net/live.htm. X-Zone Nation, the collective mood of America is undoubtedly souring. Rising murder rates, drug abuse, and corruption in high places are negatively impacting communities. My guest this hour, author Richard DeRose, takes a hard look at these issues, and others like unemployment, the banking system, unions, healthcare, violence in the streets, natural disasters, and wars in an effort to understand the current human condition and why so many people are feeling hopeless. Richard DeRose has more than 3 decades of experience in business consulting and investigative journalism, and he's the author of 2 books, Retail to Hell and Brainwashed Are You? Joining me now is Richard DeRose. And Richard, always great having you here in the X-Zone.
Thanks. It's good to be back.
Richard, what in the world is going on in the world today? Yesterday we had a pilot go bonkers in his own aircraft. We've got the shooting of a young man in Florida. We've got the Supreme Court, basically telling the President of the United States that, hey, your Health Care Act isn't that great. What you're doing is totally unconstitutional. What's going on?
Well, it's just this whole concept of losing faith in your country and your institutions. It's all part of the brainwashing scheme that's happening, worldwide. It's not just here in the United States. Of course, the United States is the world leader. Mm-hmm. So anything that happens here definitely impacts around the world.
Sure, and we see the same thing happening in the European Union with with what is going on in Greece and Italy with the currency. We've got trouble and discord in Syria. We've had the problems in Egypt. You're right; it is a worldwide issue.
Right. Even in Russia, the Soviet Union, which is one of the more stable countries, they're having a bad situation there with a lot of protests and stuff. And even our own government, the other day, Obama asked for $50 million to be freed up to help bring about democracy in the Soviet Union. Well, I'm sure they feel like they have a democracy. They have elections. They have candidates running against each other. It's supposed to determine that. But why, if you got one foot in the grave and the other banana peel, why would you be trying to irritate a very powerful potential enemy who now has got huge oil reserves, and they're starting to sell those to China, who is growing, their demand for energy like in leaps and bounds. I think they added like 10 million new cars last year, and some of them were Ford and General Motor cars that they're now touting, saying, oh, look what we did for Ford and General Motors and the other automobile industries. We brought them back. Well, this new demand for gasoline is causing us to have to pay a whole lot more at a time when we can't afford it. So it's all this interconnection of things that are really driving things up. So for everything that's positive, there's at least 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 negatives associated with it.
All right, Richard, stand by. You and I have to take a commercial break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. X-Zone Nation, my very special guest this hour, is author, and I guess we can call him a political prophet, Richard DeRose. He's the author of Retail to Hell and Brainwashed Are You? And his website is www.brainwashedareYou.com. That's brainwashed, AREYOU.com. And we'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine like hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining room can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you're visiting, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, old Florida cuisine at its best.
Are you interested in the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, or psychic phenomenon? Join me, Tim Bartley, co-host of Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, coming mid-January 2017 to the XZBN. We will channel spirits live and talk to them, revealing all kinds of amazing information. Spiritual attachments will be found and removed on the show, and so much more. To find out when you can listen to Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, visit www.xzbn.net for listeners on both sides of the veil.
Exonation, Richard DeRose is my special guest. www.brainwashedareYou.com. Richard, you say that we are being manipulated. Mankind is manipulated. Tell me, how did you discover this, and who is manipulating us?
Well, I was brought up, like most people, beginning early years Catholic Church and then later the Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel like there's a God there because everybody keeps telling you that, and you're told all this thing about the Bible and this, that, and the other, so you have these ideas about it. But I guess I was probably about 22, 23. A lot of strange things started happening to me, and I felt like I was becoming very psychic. You know, I could see things actually happening. And I wasn't too happy about that because it was disturbing. And but anyway, one night I fell asleep, and I had this dream, and I woke up, which seemed like just a few minutes later, and I'd read this book in this dream. But it was such a strange situation. I thought, that was so strange because it was like 10 o'clock in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to bed around 12 that night. So anyway, people started talking to me about I needed to write a book, and I thought, well, I remember reading a book in this dream, but I don't remember anything about it. So I tested it a couple of different ways. It was supposed to be the right thing to do. And so a couple of months later, I sat down, and then this book started flowing out of me. I just wrote one, page after another, without stopping much or thinking about anything like that, which in itself impressed me because I know that I'm not, qualified to do that as a writer. And then
Mm-hmm.
it was also about the Bible, which, people, thousands of people have taken, lifetimes even trying to figure out what it means. And all of a sudden this stuff was just coming out. So I outlined the book first, and the first part I wrote about was called Reincarnation, that chapter, because I didn't believe in it. And I was shocked to see what, was coming out of as I wrote it.
Right.
But now looking back on it, almost 35 years later, I'm 100% convinced that reincarnation is the only way you can justify God and understand what's really going on here. Because really, like the Bible says, and what the church tries to teach you, but didn't quite get there, is that we're here to grow and prosper and learn. So, we know this stuff about extraterrestrials. Most Americans believe that there's something out there. They don't really know what. They haven't seen it, like I told you in other programs. What we usually see as evidence is just manifestations, because it's all part of the trickery that's going on, because even the Bible says, for I'll send upon them a strong delusion to make them believe something that's false. So in this process, they're here, they're real, and there are our brothers, and some people might say our sisters as well, even though they don't have sex according to the Bible. They don't have gender, in other words. But what is important is they're here and they're waiting just for the right time until we reach a certain level of development, and then they're going to come back, and we'll be living on Earth with them. And I think that's going to be in the next, could be as little as 5 years, and maybe certainly no more than 15 or 20.
Now, why do you think that it is God who is trying to brainwash us?
Well, see, this is the whole thing, the whole concept of God. If you go to church, say the Catholic Church, for example, and you mention God, then, that's Jesus Christ, and then, of course, it goes up to God the Father. But if you talk to someone that's not, really religious, they might say, well, I believe in a spiritual power, a higher being, but they don't call him, Jesus Christ or God.
Right.
So that's the concept, is terminology, how we're referring to this. Like, for example, if I went in church and said, I saw an angel, a celestial being last night, in my room, some people might say, well, it's a little crazy, but others would say, hey, amen, But if I said I saw an extraterrestrial in my room last night, they'd think I was crazy, or I was, filled with the devil or whatever. So it's all in what your brain, what every individual has, in their brain is what determines how they view stuff. And so that's what it's all about. They don't want us to know exactly what they're doing. Now, this is where I think the paradox comes in, because every individual needs to know exactly what's been brainwashed are you, because it's just like if you were an accountant. You wouldn't try, say I want to be an accountant, I wouldn't try to go in and set up, an accounting office without any training or certification, because legally you have to have a license. Same for a doctor or veterinarian or whatever. But people are willing to take a chance on, they think they know from other people who are given past information that is not necessarily correct, and are willing to risk their spiritual life, which is their life, by the way, not just this human life, for, a preconceived idea that they think they're right, their ego. And that's what's scary about this, is because people do not seem to be paying attention to what's really going on. And we need to know what's going on, because, like I say, we are all in peril. Just because we know doesn't mean we're going to make all the right decisions, but it's better to know than not to know.
Why do you think that there are so many people who are actually, who are actually trying to mislead so many other people? We see that with the New Age practitioners and the end of the world prophecies that are arising, and how people are tying the Mayan calendar and other prophecies to the book of the book of Revelations. Why is it that we seem to be living in a doomed world scenario?
Well, it's all part of this scheme, like I say, to confuse people and make them give up, make them lose hope. Christians, for example, many of the ones that are born again, they believe they're going to be raptured, and therefore they won't be here when you, me, and everyone else that doesn't believe what they're saying is, going to be caught up in this mess. And we do see the mess coming. There's no question about that. I mean, anybody that doesn't is just in total denial. Things are not working like they used to be. When we're children, we're taught to behave and do the right thing and go to school and the other, and then, get a job and do the right thing by your employer, and everything will be taken care of. When you get old, they'll take care of you. Well, none of that's working anymore.
No,
nobody's job secure. Everything's changed so dramatically. But so based on what we've known in the past, we have to realize that the future is not going to be that bright. But it will be bright if we get through this test period. It's kind of like going from high school to college. A lot of people go through high school, but not many people can go through college. And then to get a PhD degree, for example, or a doctor's degree, that takes a lot more effort. So that's really where we're going right now. And so in order to keep this, like if, say, your peers, your peer group are saying, oh, you don't want to go to school, you're an idiot if you go to school, you can have fun out here, sell drugs, whatever you have to do, you make more money doing that. And so, the very things happening right now on a much bigger scale of trying to deceive people from keeping them to find the truth, which would help them get to this, higher plateau.
Why are there so many religions in this world if, in fact, there is only one God? Well,
there again, I think the whole concept of religion is really phony. For example, this isn't really about religion. That you've always heard that there's a conflict between religion and science.
Yes.
But what we're really dealing with here is science. Religion is just man-made in its own way, and so is spirituality, and so is mysticism. Because really, when you look at it, like take, for example, if I told you this 35 years ago, the human brain is a lot like an iPhone. You'd think I was crazy, because for one thing, you wouldn't know what an iPhone is.
Right.
But now that we know how important it is in some people's lives in particular and how much it can do, it's a fascinating piece of equipment. I mean, people take it for granted. It is a fascinating piece of equipment that was really unthinkable just a few years ago. But your human brain is like a huge iPhone, and that's when the Bible says, for God even knows the hairs, the number of the hairs on your head, and all the things that are going on, how God can interfere in the way that make your body well, or what He can turn, things on in your body. That may still sound far-fetched to people, but just think about it. If the iPhone can do what it can do, why can't the brain do the same thing? And why can't extraterrestrials communicate with us, making Sergeant Bales, for example, go crazy at the point where he goes out and kills 16, 17, civilians in Iraq to stir up problems over there?
Do you really think that there was an outside force when it comes to what happened with that soldier and the killing that he did in Iraq? Isn't it just possible that he just went off the deep end and it has nothing to do with extraterrestrials, God, angels, or Satan?
Yes, it could. You're right. But the thing is, the impact of what it's having to do to show our hypocrisy to the world. We take the soldier back in, bring him right back to America. Kuwait didn't want to have anything to do with him, and they demanded he leave immediately because of the politics involved. See, so this is the kind of thing, just like burning the Koran. There were the people over in Iraq were more upset about these Bibles that had been, literally written into, or not Bibles but Koran, that are books that had been written into and disgraced that way, than they were about the 17 people that were killed. And then just the other day, we offered $50,000 per person that died, and something like 5,000 or 6,000 per people that were injured or something like that. And it's just a concept of paying them off. And they were somewhat happy with that. So life doesn't matter as much as their religion. But it also goes to show the kind of hypocrisy on both sides. They should have been more upset about the 17 deaths than they were about the Quran being burned. But it's the craziness of the world, and that's when you start realizing this is more than just simply an act of violence, or like you say, the guy lost his cool, which is part of what happened. But I'm not saying that it didn't play into it, but what made him really go off the deep end and do what he did, could have been extraterrestrial influence.
You know what? I see in the world around me that people are starting to lose interest in the ET UFO scenario. People haven't seen any proof, so they're losing interest at an astonishing rate.
But they're also losing interest in a way in organized religion. Have you noticed that?
Well, yeah, because I don't think organized religion has kept up with the needs of the people. Organized religion has kept itself way back in the days of shepherds and sandstorms and people, crossing the desert in bare feet. The religion has not kept up to the demands and the requirements of modern-day man in a modern-day society. That's what I think is happening there. But when it comes to UFOs and ETs, I think that people are saying, hey, wait a minute, we've been hearing this crap for so many years now, and even now, Roswell investigators who last year were 100% convinced that it was a UFO that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico, are saying, wait a minute, new evidence has come to light that shows that the alleged crash of a UFO in Roswell, New Mexico never took place, that it had something to do with a terrestrial event, a man-made event. Richard, stand by. You and I have to take a commercial break. We'll be back on the other side of this news. Exonation Richard DeRose is my guest. www.brainwashedareYou.com. That's BrainwashedAreYou. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Exonation, Richard DeRose is my special guest this hour. His website is www.brainwashedareyu.com. That's brainwashed, AREYOU.com. Before we went to the commercial break, we were talking about not only the fall of established religions, but we're also looking at the fall of ufology. In fact, the latest attempt by Stephen Bassett to try and get some movement on the government conspiracy front. He needed a minimum of 25,000 signatures on the second part of the Rockefeller Initiative petition. Only 6,000 people around the world signed the petition, which means the petition failed. When you look at the world of ufology, there's a lot of talk. There is no evidence whatsoever to support or substantiate any claims whatsoever that UFOs are real. And Richard, what does this mean?
Well, what this means is our general perception of extraterrestrials just isn't right, and that is that these beings have maybe come back and forth throughout history and interplayed in our society, maybe even put us here to start with, which is what happened.
But how do we know that's what happened? You said put us here, and that's what happened. Why do we have to give an extraterrestrial any credit for what we as humans could very easily accomplish on our own?
Well, we do know, or at least we believe we know scientifically, that mankind over 2,000 years ago, took a quantum leap from Cro-Magnon man to a more modern man. And how that actually, transpired in itself is not as important, is understanding that, we have been manipulated for centuries to get where we are. But here's the interesting thing. The book of the Bible, disputed by some and loved by others, it's still never, fully understood. But I personally believe this, that even though all this evil is coming about, from our standpoint, not necessarily theirs, to create this situation that we're in to, test people's spirits and see how mature they are so they can go on to the next level, all this stuff is encoded in the book, and it tells you it's encoded, okay? So if you just pop it up and read it and you say, okay, this is what it says, you're making a terrible mistake. And that's why the Bible says, for both prophet and priest ply their trade through the land and have no knowledge of God, and that I will destroy my churches. And what he's basically saying is all this old stuff we've been taught, just like when the UFO stuff, is not necessarily right. There's a new way of looking at this, and encoded in the Bible, and that's what Brainwash You does. It brings that out so you can understand there's a pattern to this. And I think that a fair God doesn't necessarily throw it in your lap so you can easily understand it. But if you're willing to look for it, you can find it and heed the warnings that are there for you. Doesn't mean just because you know what they are, including me, that I'm going to do the right thing for the right reasons.
Let me throw a hypothesis at you. Is it possible that humanity created heaven and hell in order to give some sort of semblance to the world that they didn't know at the time, and that heaven and hell has progressed to being the scapegoat for man's fallacies and shortfalls?
Well, until this book came into my life, that's exactly what I believed. And then all of a sudden you start seeing this pattern of events. I mean, it's empirical, knowledge here that we have that you know what's going to happen. And I'm lucky in that way that I've known this for, quite some time. And then you see these things falling into play. For a man like Barack Obama to come along and do as much as he's done, as predicted, in the scriptures.
What's he done? That's wait. What's he done?
Well, for one thing, just the other day, Friday on the March 16th, he had a martial law executive order. Do you know about that?
Yeah.
Totally contradictory to the Constitution of the United States.
Well, he's doing a lot of things that are contradictory to the Constitution.
But that's
and
also an act of treason, and nobody holds him accountable for it.
Well, how can you hold the President of the United States under executive authority treasonous?
Well, if he goes against the Constitution, he doesn't have that legal right to do that. It's supposed to go through Congress, and then the courts are supposed to decide this stuff.
Well, then how come
there's
nobody's
not enough integrity in this country to actually, stand up for what's right anymore? Everybody's been bought off or sold out or whatever because of the nature of the beast. And so there's this huge, level of corruption, not just in the politicians, but in the people themselves. If we had a solution like Retail to Hell talks about, the first book I wrote, or published actually, then that situation would be a case where excuse me, I just had an interruption here. This first book, Retail to Hell, if people had adhered to that and solved the problems, then we wouldn't be where we are right now. But we're watching our system literally collapse. And, because of that, we can't seem to fix it. It's too late to fix it. So we have to go down. The system has to collapse and be built back. But the question is there enough integrity in the people to do the necessary things to make it work right? So when we do build back, that we can have a better society. I say no. It's not. They're not there.
So what do you think the answer is?
Well, it's what I'm saying. There is an answer, and that answer is in this situation that God is manipulating all this, and one day He'll put a stop to it. We're going to get to the point where we're almost at the point where destroying this Earth through nuclear proliferation, World War III, and then when all of this comes about, it's going to be a situation where there's nothing we can do but go along with God's plan. I mean, He's totally in control of this. Like I say, He knows what you and I are saying. And by that I mean, the Holy Spirit and others that are really monitoring us.
So tell me, if God has never been seen, how do we know He really exists?
Well, that's the point. You don't know.
So why are we taking so much credence in a hypothetical situation and a person or entity that may or may not exist?
Well, that's the part that they say is faith.
But faith was created by man, not God.
Well, we don't know that for sure. I mean, you can say that. But what I know is the fact that I've seen all this stuff take place.
Like
now,
what?
If you're not paying attention, well, just the whole development of everything, in particular in the last few years, the situation with the economy collapsing. I actually, when I wrote Retail to Hell, I said that in 10 years, it came out in 98, that it would be apparent to everyone that this system could not sustain itself. In 2008, it starts collapsing. Okay, now, I didn't know 10 years. I just said that. I don't know where it came from. But it's exactly what's happening. I said, 2011 will be the year that starts the revolution. 2012 is going to be, I think, basically a year that starts pretty much what we call the countdown. And so this stuff is taking place, and then you watch the significant events that are taking place. They're not random. They can't be random. There's too many of them happening. And even the situation like you had mentioned about the extraterrestrial part, that's part of brainwashing people to believe that somehow, we're not important other than just, these space beings that have traveled from here to yonder and
but once again, Richard, there's no proof whatsoever that these alleged space beings are in fact anything more than a figment of the imagination of a few.
Well, they are in many ways, if you look at what we think we know. But if you look back at the part that's really behind there, which are thousands of angels, extraterrestrial angels, if you want to call them that, those are the ones that are really manipulating this. They're our brethren. And so this is like, you got to get into it a little bit more than just looking at it from a standpoint of, like I said earlier, they're just passing through time and, they put us here to test us out.
But we don't know if this is true. We don't know if this isn't just a fairy tale like like Mother Goose or like the cow that jumped over the moon.
Exactly. I mean, it's tough. You're right. It's very tough, and that's what.
But in today's society, in today's world, we don't need fiction. We need fact. And I think that too many people are putting way too much credence and hopes in in their belief that what they believe is real and that their belief is going to save them. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news. If you're not going to save yourself, you're not going to be saved. It's that plain. It's that simple.
Well, I agree with you there. People, unfortunately, are egotistical, and they think that whatever they've come to believe in has to be the truth, whether somebody taught them that. I mean, the worst people in all to talk to are born-again Christians, because they believe that, no matter what you say, you got to be wrong. If you question anything they believe in, it's absolutely, the work of the devil or whatever. And but what this is kind of all about, and the craziness of it, is that when this is all over with and the extraterrestrials actually come back here and land on the Earth, you're not going to be shocked. If you're still standing here, you're going to say, oh, okay, I understand this. Just like when somebody handed you an iPhone. You might say, what is this? It was the most intelligent phone ever invented.
Do you
and
really
you start playing with it and you accept it?
Do you really believe that there are extraterrestrials?
I do, yes.
Why do you believe that? Have you seen one?
Well, because this is too patterned, too much organization. And we even look at the way the universe is put together. Even the situation with the negative side of it, the bad weather, the bacterial infections and viruses and all that kind of stuff, they're all part of a major concept. You're not supposed to be healthy. You're supposed to suffer. You're supposed to do all this, that, and the other. And these are kind of things that you'd like to get away from and have a perfect world, but you're not going to have that.
But isn't that just passing the buck? Like,
Well,
we're not supposed to be healthy, so God or whoever the aliens are, they decided to strike us down with a plague. Now, that doesn't make very good sense to me.
Well, that's the hard part about this. In many ways, it doesn't. I mean, we're human, and we don't get the big picture as much as we should.
Well, maybe we get the big
frustrating.
picture. Maybe we do get the big picture. And a lot of eyes are being opened up now saying, hey, wait a minute, hold on, something's very wrong here. Like when you look in biblical times, God is not a nice person.
Exactly.
He is a meanie. It's
Right.
his way or the highway. And, look what happened to the Egyptians. Look what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah.
Well, to a Christian, and other people who are really religious, to say that God does evil is just a crime in itself. But he admits it in the Bible.
Yeah.
And it's in Brainwashed Are You. So this is going on. But, there has to be bad in order for people to learn good. If everything was good, you wouldn't learn anything. We're not here to live just to live a good life. We're here to learn spiritually, because it's mind, body, spirit.
But is that what life is really about, or are we just an organism that is here for a brief period of time? We're born, we die, that's it. And
Right,
do
that's
we
what some people
use
believe.
religion? Do we use religion to give us a bit of a hope that there's more to life than just this little split second in the big time-space continuum?
I used to believe that myself, and then all of a sudden, like I say, this enlightenment came from this book, and now after watching it for all these years, there's no question in my mind. I'm 100% convinced that God's behind this. Like you say, you could even call him borderline personality disorder, the way he acts and does things. But in the end, it says in the Bible, when you see the beauty of the people that come out of this, then and only then you'll understand why I did what I did.
But we're not going to be around, hypothetically, when this happens.
Well, your spirit will be, and that's the whole point, is your spirit knows what you've done before. And that's been proven to me, through God and letting me understand a couple of people that were, spiritual beings that I knew in the past and has come back. And for a short time, up until about the time a child's, 5 years old, and maybe that can happen even with your new grandbaby, where you start to see this truth. God opens your eyes to it, where you can see that this, a child, would come back and from a past and just indicate little things that they've been here before. Some people might argue that's satanic power, this, that, and the other, and then they got a right to do that. But we cannot 100% grasp a hold of anything and say this is finite, because, it isn't.
Then how can we say with any certainty that any of the religious teachings are finite?
Well, I think most religious teachings aren't. There's truth in everything, and there's a lot of deception. And you asked earlier, why so many religions? That's the thing that really shocks me, is because mankind is easy to manipulate and brainwash. Very easy. Why do you have to make it so intense? You could do it with 3 religions or 10 religions, not who knows how many there are out there.
Well, everybody wants to have their own town, and everybody wants to have their own sheriff.
Right. Yeah, and that's an ego thing, too. It's just kind of, they want to have their own football team they can rally behind.
Exactly.
They don't care if they hurt the other guy on the other team. In fact, the quarterback gets hurt so you can win the ball game. That's the kind of mentality that's human. But by doing that, see, when you get into the spiritual world, in other words, when you receive an extraterrestrial or new body, that's when your spirit can interact with its old self and understand all the evil that it's done in the past. And there will be people that are spiritual beings that are now celestial beings that have made it that far because they progressed spiritually and from a character standpoint, where they can live in that life and look back on those lives. And like it says in the Bible, that when that happens, that no longer will I have to remember your sins, you'll remember them yourself.
But the Bible was written by man. It wasn't written by any deity.
Well,
so you had
again, that was my argument too.
So you have a bunch of guys who've written a book. It went to the Council of Nicaea. The book has been edited so many times, and yet so many people take it for verbatim.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, there again, I think the fundamental basics of it, like if you read the scriptural content in Brainwashed Are You, you'd say, whoa, I never read that before. Where's this come from? It's in the Bible. Now, man didn't put that in there. Man didn't put in all the bad stuff about God when he's trying to convince people to be manipulated by this higher being or do the right thing. Man would have purged all those bad, things that God says, I do evil and this, that, and the other. But they didn't. And so that's another justification for saying that, God's really behind this, because they didn't clean it up like they should have.
All right, stand by, Richard. You and I have to take our final break. Exonation, Richard DeRose is our special guest. www.brainwashedaru.com. That's brainwashed, AREYOU.com. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break.
18 Sergeant Central. 19 Sergeant check. Officers on the scene.
Hi, I'm Larry Lawson, host of Paranormal Stakeout. With over 36 years in law enforcement, I have learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, UFOs, and extraterrestrials, how we gather the evidence, preserve that evidence, and present it to a jury of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Join me, Larry Lawson, every week on Paranormal Stakeout when, along with my guests, we'll take a journey to prove with indisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Go to xzbn.net for the broadcast schedule and check me out at paranormalstakeout.com.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Exonation, Richard DeRose is my special guest this hour, and it's always great having Richard on the show. He's the author of two books. The first book is Retail to Hell, and the second book is Brainwashed Are You? His website is www.brainwashedaru.com, and that's brainwashed, AREYOU.com. Richard, do you think there'll ever be world peace?
Not in the next 5-10 years, until all this comes back where, like I said, the extraterrestrials return, and we'll see them returning in the sky, and like we'll say, we'll accept that. I think, you ask a question about how do we know this stuff.
Yeah.
I think deep down inside everybody's spirit, we know what the answers are. We know really who we call Jesus Christ and all the other stuff that goes with it. We basically know that, but what happens is, from the time that you're born until the time you're about 5, the spirit's very alive in the body, but it has no real control over it because the muscles and everything else don't work. You can't really speak. You start to learn how to walk. And as you grow from that infancy of first few months up until age 5, the brain starts taking over the body, and then the needs of the body start taking over, and the spirit kind of gets pushed to the background. And so at the age of 5 and above, we're really running off our brain but the spirit's back there influencing. It's going to have something to do with the character and this, that, and the other. So it's a trilateral type of arrangement where mind, body, spirit. But once we see all this stuff coming about, some people in their spirit will become stronger because they'll want to resist this temptation that's out there, and so many things are in the future going to happen that we'll see this. And to fight this resistance, you have to have a strong spirit. And so, that's where it's going to all come into play. And then God's going to recognize that and say, this spirit is mature enough to go here, here, and here. Because through reincarnation, you understand that God puts us where we're supposed to be. I know black people that feel like they're white, and white people that feel like they're black because of other incarnations. And, you shouldn't hold it against God or yourself because you're black, because that's just a temporary state which might last, 30, 40, 50, 60 years or 70 years. You're there for a reason to learn from that experience. And so you see certain elements in the crime segment in black communities that you don't see in some white communities or Hispanic communities and things like that. So God decides where you're going to go. That's why you're judged. And people use that as an example. In the Bible, they say there is no such thing as reincarnation because it says in the Bible that just as is for man to live once and then comes judgment, so is for Christ to have died for all sins. But it also says, for it's written here a little, there a little, line upon line, precept upon precept. There's basically two precepts there. And if we take out the first one, it is just for man to live once and then comes judgment. That's what reincarnation is. The man, mind, body, spirit, both male and female, lives in that body for that time period from, could be a few days to, 95 years or so. And what happens, though, in that process, when you die, then that spirit, what it learned, because God knows all this stuff, then it's put into another body, or maybe put into a state of limbo for a short while, or whatever happens. And then eventually it comes to this time period. 2012 could be the beginning of it. That's why it seems to be such a significant year, not the end, but the beginning. And then in this process, we'll go on for another few years. Another interesting fact is the population growth in...
Rich, I hate to do this, but we've run out of time for tonight. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Always a great pleasure talking to you. Exonation, my guest this hour, Richard DeRose. And he is the author of Brainwashed Are You? www.brainwashedareYou.com. I'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes past the hour. Don't go away.